Former South African politician, award-winning author and consultant Tony Leon joins us now to talk about the political ongoings in the country as President Cyril Ramaphosa faces calls from some of his detractors to step down as the African National Congress, the governing party, held an NEC meeting earlier on today, which was postponed until Sunday, until it says when the NWC meets and discusses the Section 189 report, which was recently released. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Leon. We've heard from various quarters of society on how the process should unfold now. I'd like to hear from the prism you're looking at these developments, and are you satisfied with the outcome, particularly today, the postponement of the ANC-NEC meeting, and why?
No, I think the situation's a complete mess. I think the ANC and indeed the man at the centre, Storm Cyril Ramaphosa, are irresolute. They're not resolved to anything except to kick the can down the road, but the can hasn't got very far to be kicked, because next Tuesday, Parliament's going to have to make a decision on what to do with this report that was handed to them, the Section 89 report chaired by the former Chief Justice. So, you know, I can't see any way out of this except for the process to be followed. And that means when you have a very lengthy report that you, being Parliament, has requested from some eminent jurists to do anything except take the next step, which means they're going to have an inquiry into the prima facie findings made by the panel which is appointed, which means this matter, short of Cyril Ramaphosa resigning, is just going to drag on, well, for months, I imagine, and the country will be on autopilot. But the person who set the autopilot is himself deeply compromised. So it's a very unhappy situation.
Just looking at who has the final say, the National Assembly would require a two-thirds majority to vote out, or rather impeach President Cyril Ramaphosa. And we know that a significant number of those votes would come from the ANC. Now, bar its internal infighting, I was just looking earlier on at a report saying that there's speculation that there's actually a significant amount of support for President Ramaphosa within the ANC. And if his departure really would be good for the party in terms of its governing party status. What are your thoughts about that, and how important is it, the internal rumblings within the party, and where it will lead us as a constitutional democracy on dealing definitively with this matter?
Well, here's the great irony. Look, there are very few countries in the developing world where this process could have been as evolved as has been South Africa. It really is, if you want to take some good thoughts out of it, it's unusual for a country which is a young democracy to go through the processes and steps that the South African constitutional order has got up to this point. So that is a good thing. The bad thing is, although we're a constitutional democracy, very little happens in our parliament, although we have 400 very well remunerated MPs who are meant to be independent minded, which in terms of the majority happens outside of the orders of the ANC NEC. So although there is a parliament, it's separate from the party, they are, for the purposes of realpolitik, one and the same thing, which means it's very improbable that any steps will be taken by the majority in parliament which are not mandated by the ANC-NEC. The ANC-NEC itself is split, as we've seen. I mean, they're now fighting in public and contradicting each other at a very senior level, which is perhaps unprecedented and suggests the ruling party is going through some kind of unraveling. But to answer your primary question, every poll I've seen and just every political instinct that I've developed over the years suggests that warts and all, flaws and all, adverse reports he's faced and misgovernance steps, Cyril Ramaphosa is essential to the ANC's political survival, and therefore very few political parties in recorded history commit suicide. So they're likely to hang on to him with a grim determination because he is their electoral get out of jail card. Whether, of course, he's going to be able to do anything in government while this goes on must be seriously open to question. And I strongly suspect, to the extent we can believe any of the reports, that his instinctive decision to resign or to step back yesterday was probably taken in the knowledge that even if he stays on, even if he isn't impeached, even if the inquiry is stopped, he's going to be in such a compromised position that as the leader of a country in very difficult circumstances, he's going to be completely ineffective. And that's why this, as I mentioned yesterday in an interview, we're the kind of land of lousy options right now. There's no good thing to do. You just got to do the less worse thing, in my view.
Would you say there would be some silver linings going to 2024? Obviously, the predictions would be that the split votes would be greater, but then who or what then benefits from that? Whether or not the ANC fractures further or implodes, will our constitutional democracy be better off in terms of many more options to choose from? Some are even suggesting a breakaway party from within the ANC.
Well, look, anything is possible. This is a fast unraveling situation, and we really are, to use a cliche, if you say, in uncharted waters here, because usually when there's been splits at the top of the ANC with Thabo Mbeki and with Jacob Zuma, it all moved quite swiftly towards the end point when both of them were recalled. This is a much more protracted situation with a much less certain outcome. So, but as to the general question that you ask, look, democracies do well when they get renewed, and renewal can't happen with the same organization at the top. There's got to be some change. And I do think that although there are very specific circumstances of this report, I mean, these extraordinary goings on the president's game farm, Phala, the fact that the judges didn't essentially believe any of his versions of events, which I think is very serious for his credibility. But I do think it's symptom rather than cause. I think, look, we're in a country, 28 years of one-party government. We don't have electricity on a constant basis. We have an economic a downturn of epic proportion. We have unemployment sky high. There is a break point. And I think what you're seeing inside the ANC is to some extent reflective of the external forces outside it, all of which, of course, have been speeded up because of this report, which is like a loaded gun, which has been put on the table, which the trigger can be pulled either by Ramaphosa's internal opponents and primarily by his external opponents. So that, I think, is the situation we're in. Speaking
of renewal, very briefly, should the ANC, stand intact come 2024, albeit with a reduced majority? Would the country be better off with a coalition government nationally, or greater coalescence in the existing parties, with them benefiting from a split ANC?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the ANC itself is an agglomeration of factions, as I think is very well known. I'm not saying anything that's not known. I think, though, the country could only benefit if there was some significant people and parties from outside the current governing party, being brought into government, because I think, if we carry on doing the same thing with the same people, you can absolutely generously bet on getting the same results. And the results we have at the moment are very negative for most South Africans, for the country's economy, for its investment profile. And that clearly needs to change. And something radical has got to happen in order for the change to come about.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Much appreciated for your views. Former South African politician and award-winning author and consultant Tony Leon, speaking to us about the latest political developments here in South Africa.